Question or makes the following statement. Barring a fundamental change in the overall civil-military relationship in the all-volunteer era, an Ivy League ROTC program would arguably be poorly attended due to socioeconomic reasons, if nothing else. This is not a good return on investment for the military in strictly recruitment efficiency terms. Therefore, should the military put the ROTC into the Ivy League schools at cost, if you will, in order to cultivate the greater cultural good? How do you build the business model for that kind of commitment, given all the pressures on the Defense Department budget?
Right. Well, I tried to address this in the 12-minute frame, but much too in passing. It's very easy as a civilian on the Upper West Side of New York to say yes. The government, speaking generically, this has a real investment in, as I put it, I'm sure, too portentously, in binding up the nation's cultural wounds from the 60s, which linger on in attenuated form, and even in inherited form, as we've heard. And however, as I also mentioned, the model of ROTC in small schools like Ivy League schools that flourished between the end of the Second World War and the dramas of the late 60s, early 70s cannot return for many reasons, and one of them is precisely this, that the numbers will not be there. Some of those numbers, as I indicated, were clearly due to the old American tradition of draft-induced volunteering. Some of the numbers in that period reflected a choice on the part of students to serve as officers for a longer period of time than as enlisted men in the ranks for a shorter period of time, and some of it had to do with a sense of a patriotic obligation, and the two are not incompatible, of course, far from it. Today, all this is true. At Columbia, we have the vision, the dream, perhaps, of restoring an ROTC unit to our campus, which would clearly have to draw on students from other campuses, a subway ride away. And that is good. It is good that they no longer be exclusivistic or exclusive Ivy League units. I think that's terrific at the micro level. It gets away from this awful word elitism, which is one of the words I'd like to shoot down in the American vocabulary, or elitist. Elite is a good word, but those two words, in my opinion, are bad words. And I think that the necessary mixing of ROTC units from, among institutions necessary to bring them up into the necessary scale is a positive contribution in these terms.
Thank you. We have one final question, and we're really right at the edge of our time. So let me read the question, and anyone can respond. The questioner says, the current ROTC model is by some measures antiquated, a relic of another era. Little discussion has taken place on broad changes that might be made to the structure or function to update the needs of ROTC, I take it, for the 21st century and meet the desires of the Academy. If you were king for a day, what changes would you make to ROTC?
Well, I'm not sure I'm able to address that articulately. I mean, my activism, to draw on the American vocabulary on this question, is largely driven by my sense of citizenship and feeling for the importance of a redefined civil-military relationship, of which clearly an important symbolic as well as substantive aspect would be the remarriage, so to speak, of the Ivy League with our military. I'm far less concerned with the nuts and bolts. I leave that to others who deal in detail on these matters, I can only observe that the availability at Ivy League schools of courses and studies in history, international relationship, not least languages, including many non-Western languages, is a precious asset. I think it's quite important. Look, my memory at Columbia of NROTC is that it was very segregated, culturally, socially. The people who did NROTC hung out together. I suddenly have a flash image of a dramatic moment in '68. We had a little uprising in '68, in which I was in the middle of it, and at one moment I thought I would die when a phalanx of anti-riot students were headed toward an occupied building, while a number of us had interposed our frail professorial flesh between this advancing phalanx and the students inside. And I had many thoughts, because I thought it was the end, so you have many thoughts at that time. And one of them was that I had many students, a graduate and an undergraduate, behind me in the occupied building. And as I looked and saw the troops advancing, I didn't recognize one of my students among them. That must change.